Hi, I'm Jason Bass, and I'm one of the hosts for the Southern Entrepreneur Conference. This is James Russell Lingerfeld, and he would have been our MC. Because of coronavirus, we had to take this conference online, so we thought we'd create this little intro.
We asked the speakers to just tell their stories and sprinkle some wisdom along the way on how they accomplished their goals. And you can read about each of the speakers at southernerentrepreneur.org.
We'd like to thank our sponsors, BMW of South Atlanta, the EMC of Coweta and Fayette counties, and Jason Hunter Design. We hope you enjoy the conference.
My name is Mercedes Bankston. I'm so excited to speak to participants of the Southern Entrepreneur Conference. Today, I'm going to be talking about revenue. I have a list of practical advice on how to maximize your profit, as well as tools for you to research and look at moving forward. So one of the reasons that I'm speaking at the Southern Entrepreneurs Conference is because some of my grassroots started out on a farm in Newnan, Georgia. So like a lot of farm kids, I have a lot of perseverance, a lot of creativity, just have kind of the need to figure things out. Because when you live on a farm, it's not like you can go running to your next door neighbor to help solve a problem. From there, I started my first company at 19 while I was in university, ended up selling it at 22. I grew that company actually quite rapidly and made a ton of mistakes along the way. A lot of those mistakes I'll be talking to you about today. I ended up moving to Salt Lake City, Utah to help launch healthcare for Cisco Systems. Along the way, ended up moving to New York and then to California to work for NEC Corporation and also Oracle. While I was at Oracle, I ran a pilot program, and my pilot program came in at $30 million in year one. At the same time, I was also involved in nonprofit work with Girls in Tech. So I was helping women create apps, improve their STEM careers, launch new companies, and actually also sell their companies as well. And then went to freeconferencecall.com, where I just learned so much about the value of slivers of pennies. Once you start thinking in slivers of pennies, you can actually really start to grow your company in ways that you didn't see before. I moved to Europe. I currently actually live in London, but I moved there for McGraw-Hill education. I ended up launching a digital product in 135 countries, and then I took on another digital product after that. And currently, I still run the Founder Institute, which takes companies from an idea to launch, and we help them get funded. So you can tell I have quite a bit of experience. And the question is, like you, I'm also kind of moving along my entrepreneurial journey. So my next sector is actually to move into venture capital, and I'm looking at starting my own venture capital fund. And the reason for this is between Girls in Tech and Founders Institute, I am a partial owner of almost 200 companies at this point in time. And they're all looking for funding. But funding actually is kind of my favorite part of where a company is at. I love to look and see like where they spend their money. I love to see where companies are wasting money. And the idea really is with my alternative fund is that I'm going to help entrepreneurs really maximize their profits, which is actually the best thing when you're looking at an exit. But enough about me. The question is how do you survive as a company before receiving financing or generating revenue? So one of the best things that you can take away from my presentation today is how to not screw up your company before it even starts. Too many companies make poor decisions upfront that prevent them from moving forward. They can't attract rounds of funding because they didn't have that foresight. These costly mistakes not only will create continuous cash flow problems from the beginning, but they're going to cripple you as time goes on. In my experience, it seems that mistakes that are made in that first 6-month period actually will cripple a company 5 years down the road, even a year down the road. But it's always a mistake that happened in the beginning. Sometimes it is impossible to know where you are headed without reflecting where you come from. And the point of this message is that you need to have an exercise by yourself and also with your co-founders and also with your employees. I make my employees document their personal, career, and financial goals. And the reason for this is I need to know their baseline of what they need to cover. I want to know if they have a wedding coming up or they want a new car, because that's how I'm going to incent them in the future. But even as a co-founder or as a founder, I want to know what that is myself. So I need to know how many trips I need to take. Do I have private school? Do I have childcare? These are all the things that you need to know when you're running a company, because if you can't meet the financial needs of yourself, then how are you going to push yourself to that next level? And this is why I'm going to talk to you about the fully loaded employee. This is the baseline on allowing for high margins. Part of the survival of a startup is keeping the costs low out of the gate. I mean, so oftentimes I walk into a company that receives funding and they're all of a sudden like buying conferencing services and new phones and like new computers or even new cars. That's not going to help you become a profitable company. And as we can see today, we thought the economy was in a great position, yet companies aren't able to survive more than 2 to 3 months. Let me tell you, that does not mean that was a great running company. That is a company that has let their costs just go completely nuts. A lot of the things that I've learned, I've picked up actually during the financial crisis. And it was really about how do I reduce cost? And I'll tell you some of those stories, like moving a little bit more forward today. But when we talk about the fully loaded employee, I always ask at conferences, how many people know that cost? And I will tell you, if it's all founders and co-founders, I would say 20% of the audience actually knows the cost of a fully loaded employee. When it comes to middle management, typically only 1 to 3 people raise their hand. And it's just completely unacceptable. It is completely unacceptable that you do not know your employee cost out of the gate. So here's some suggestions on things that should be on that spreadsheet. It ranges from insurance to the cost per head of a conferencing service. If you lease a building, you need to know how much is that employee costing you per square foot. Phone lines, mobile desk, employee happiness. I do believe that employees should have spiffs and contests and rewards to push them to the next level, which means more profit for you if you're using those incentives correctly. And then things like, taxes on top of salary. So how can you reduce some of these costs? Well, ways to reduce employee costs, it could be like a fractional employee. So look for part-time workers. Japan has an entire segment of women that only work from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. in the afternoon. And it's considered completely socially acceptable. It's unfortunate the United States actually hasn't adopted something like this. But I will tell you, there's lots of moms out there that make great employees that don't want to work 40-hour a week. And the great thing about having part-time employees is you kind of pay them less. They're a little bit more productive when they're in the office 6 hours a day. They're not spending 30 minutes at the water cooler having a conversation about whatever. In this point of time with coronavirus, we have a lot of people who are going to be pushed into retirement. Those people might not want to work full time. They might still have, the need to work part-time to cover expenses. Go and look for retired workers. Look for parents, teachers, people on LinkedIn. You can find these type of people everywhere. Interns can be a complex process, but if you are close to a university, I would really look into their intern type program. Students are oftentimes very desirable employees. And the reason I'll tell you why I think students are really great for marketing type roles is that they're a little bit closer to the newer social media. Up until last year, I wasn't actually really aware of what TikTok was or how to advertise on TikTok. These are things that students are going to tell you, like what works, what doesn't, what they're willing to look at. If that is your target market, hire from your target market, because they're going to be able to tell you where to push your advertising to. Various states have different apprenticeship training programs. I know in California, when I was living there, at one time they would pay, I think, for 6 months of taking someone who was unemployed to on-the-job type program that employer provided. And that was just excellent, because that meant that the government paid 6 months of that program. I'm not sure what Georgia has, but that's something that I encourage you to look at. So one of the things that drives me crazy is financial waste. This, I can't even tell you how much this drives me nuts. So the average salary in Georgia is $59,000. So I just kind of topped it off, a good round number, for $65,000. The typical employee probably will work 240 days, accounting for $270 a day. So every time someone like wastes a ton of time, they're wasting $270 of your money. And every time that there is a pointless meeting, or they're not getting things done, I guess, again, that's basically $34 that just went down the drain. When we look at companies and meeting culture, this is, like I said, one of my biggest pet peeves. There's tons of studies on companies that have just wasted money. And I'll give you a great example of a large company, Mattel, which you can research. Mattel's Monster High logo, 90 meetings. Mattel spent 90 meetings on the Monster High logo. By the way, there were more than 5 people in some of those meetings, oftentimes up to 30 people. It is one of the biggest disasters in meeting culture history that has been well documented. So you can imagine, I think they spent just millions coming up with the logo. There's no reason for that, but we also do it at small companies. So taking that $65,000 employee, you're going to see the numbers right here on the screen, where you have a meeting with 5 employees once a week per year, like say on a Monday morning. You just wasted almost $9,000. Where could you put that $9,000? Could those employees have actually been doing something a little bit more beneficial? I think meetings should be 15 minutes at a maximum. Every time you have a 1-hour company meeting for 20 employees, that's basically a $700 expense. And if you do that, every other week, you're basically wasting $18,000 a year. These numbers add up quick, and it's really important that you start figuring out how much meetings cost you and how much meetings cost per employee, which is going to get into a lot of other things that I talk about. If you have 1-hour meetings, I would recommend always pushing them back to 50 minutes long. This allows employees 10 minutes to spend time on email, getting prepared for the next meeting. Allows them to recharge. Sometimes they need that. You don't want them walking into another meeting just basically asleep. 30-minute meetings, I cut back to 20 to 25-minute meetings. When you do this initially, it's a little bit difficult, but over time, it becomes so easy. Now I only do 20-minute meetings, and at about the 18-minute mark, I'm bored. I'm just wondering, when will this call end? I also turn off my email oftentimes 3 to 4 hours a day. As an owner of a company or a co-founder, you need to only be working on things that make you money. Email oftentimes doesn't make you money, and it can just become this mindless trap. The same with instant messenger, things like Slack. I also turn them off. I don't let my employees eat at their desk. There's lots of studies on why this is very beneficial to the work environment. It actually also saves you money on healthcare cost, but I won't get into that. When you feel like a meeting isn't going well, or you're just kind of sitting there bouncing ideas back and forth, make everyone stand up. Nothing makes a meeting come to an end quicker than people who have to stand up. If you are a company that sends questions like, hey, what time are you available? Learn how to use calendar invites. Learn how to look at everyone's calendar and pick out the right time. I've seen these emails go for weeks at a time because no one actually took the initiative to look at the background of scheduling in a calendar. If you don't know how to do these things, then I would highly recommend hiring a student that can show you. I mean, this is a great skill set for them. And figure out how to optimize all functions within your company. A lot of things and a lot of resources aren't needed. A lot of people aren't needed. If you ever have a question on how to reduce your employee counts and maximize your workforce, definitely reach out to me. So financials, how to go lean. So in the beginning, I think I told you that some of the mistakes that I see that cripple a company oftentimes were made upfront, and oftentimes it's within contracts and payment terms. I think everyone should be able to figure out how to get paid upfront. We're moving into a direction, particularly with software companies, you can always get paid upfront. Contracts don't have to be on 90-day payment terms or even 30-day payment terms. So no matter who you are, work with a CFO or work with someone that has financial planning that can help write your contracts where you get paid right away, because you're going to need that cash flow to move forward. Other mistakes that I often see are people that go and get a brand new office and they buy new desks, new chairs, new cubicles. I'll tell you that I actually sourced a 60-person office off Craigslist for free. Craigslist is a valuable tool. I mean, oftentimes people just need to move out of their office and all you have to do is go pick up a 1999 U-Haul and go pick up some conference tables, and they're in good condition. These are very expensive purchases, so consider like how to lower those costs when you're moving into a new office. So technology is always an interesting subject. And the reason for this is, yeah, you're going to need, AWS or servers, wireless, security, particularly if you're dealing with credit cards. You could either hire an IT team, which will actually have several people, or you could go with like Meraki and have one employee. Now, if you factor out the cost of having one or two employees running Meraki versus, a disparate network, the costs basically, you would do better with Meraki in about 3 years versus having disparate systems. Car mileage. A lot of you will have sales teams. And one of the things I would encourage you to do is to make sure that your employees have fuel incentives. So pay them more if they have a natural gas vehicle, if they have an electric vehicle. And the reason that you do that is because they don't become as greedy just naturally. But if you live in a state that has HOV express lane, that means that that particular person can oftentimes go through toll booths or in the HOV lane as a single occupancy passenger and get to the meeting faster. When I lived in California, the people that had natural gas vehicles could go to 5 meetings a day versus the person who had a gas vehicle who could only get to 2 to 3 meetings a day. Traffic is a huge factor in these type of purchases. So incentivize your employees to do something for you that actually also makes them money. Communications. This is always an interesting one. So, sometimes you're going to pay for employee phones, particularly cell phones, and also conferencing services. I'll tell you a story that several years ago, I had a team, all their phones were between, I think, $125 and $150 on a postpaid plan, corporate plan, and I needed to cut expenses. I ended up putting them all on prepaid Verizon. Verizon actually also was our postpaid network. And I think their phone services were only $35 a piece. I was able to save, basically 80% of my budget on that line item. That made a massive difference to me. And it's going to make a massive difference to small companies, particularly starting out. Conferencing costs, you can always, a lot of consultants use conferencing services. They have expensive bills. There's a lot of flat rate companies out there like startmeeting.com. So go and check those out. So expenses and budget guidelines for traveling. This is always a sore subject with my team, but I'll tell you that there's a lot of reasons this works. I do a meal limitation per day, not per meal. I think $50 to $70 is pretty standard. And I'd say that's been standard at every corporate company I've worked for in the past 10 years. Getting tied to, chain hotels like Hilton.com isn't the best thing for your business, particularly if you're traveling to obscure areas. Hotels.com is just good enough. After 10 hotel stays, you get one free. For conferences, oftentimes I've used booking a house for my team versus individual hotel rooms, particularly in places like San Francisco. The cost savings is dramatic, and it also allows employees to be able to eat breakfast, within the house. Beverages. This is touchy, particularly with my team in London. They can't stand this, but I have a 2-drink limitation on the employee dime. When I put this into place, I would say that sexual harassment claims and car accidents went down 90%. So just think, it's not just the alcohol that you're paying for. You might be paying for legal issues moving forward. And airline change fees, this drives me nuts. When I lived in the United States, I typically always flew Delta, and I'm a big fan of Delta. But Southwest doesn't have airline change fees. When I had my team switch over to Southwest, I saved hundreds of thousands of dollars over a 2-year time frame. So don't waste money. Figure out where you can save it. And that is why when you have a startup, you should go lean. So we've talked about all these costs that are involved in the fully loaded employee, from travel costs to the cost of their desk space, various subscription fees for marketing, their salary. But what about the cost of a fully loaded product? And no one really talks about this either. That would be the cost of your fully loaded employee for cost per meeting, all their coffee, the operation, the sales and marketing budgets. How many hours did they spend trying to get, that new contract? Is it 10 hours? Was it 20 hours? Is it, a 1-hour sale? Is it something that clients can just purchase on the web? All these costs of the product are essential. You need to know the difference between good revenue and bad revenue. And just real quick, bad revenue is a client that, eats up 80% of all your cost, and you're only getting 20% margin. And those are the clients that require special build outs, where it sounds really attractive, but it's hurting your business by building those special items for them. And that's something you probably should just reach out to me offline or, type a comment in the text box below. The right advice up front is something that's going to save you a ton of money in the long run. I always recommend getting errors and omissions insurance for directors and officers, just kind of out of the gate. It's very inexpensive, and it's going to save you a ton of money. I also recommend, putting a Chinese firewall with your house and your property away from your business. You don't want to cross-contaminate, because it could open you up to lawsuits, particularly if you had an employee who hit someone or you hit someone and, unfortunately killed them. So talk to lawyers about maybe putting your house in a trust to make sure that you protect it from the company. Obviously, I am not an attorney, and this is their specialty, but this is why I really suggest you talk to insurance agents and lawyers about kind of the risk that are involved. You can also get insurance for, software type reasons. And I'll tell you a quick story. I used to work for a guy that purchased this type of insurance. It was a legal software insurance plan, and the largest telecom company ended up suing him. 5 years later, they were still in the lawsuit. The company was wondering, like, why hasn't he gone out of business? And it was because all his legal fees were covered for. So there's a lot of specialty policies out there that you can get for things like patents. Lloyd's of London is actually probably the most well-known in the world for specialty reasons. You can insure a body part, particularly if that body part is actually for your company. Things like Dropbox, cloud storage and sharing services, don't be cheap. Quick story on that. I had a team that had used this years ago, and they had a client pay them $500,000 of consulting services, and all that information was in a free Dropbox. Well, the lead engineer, he left the company, and he wouldn't give that information back, and it ended up becoming a nightmare where the company had to sue him, and it spent months in court, and it actually also cost us the client. That was a client that spent millions. So these are things that you need to think about and weigh the risk when you use free programs. But when it comes to cloud storage, you need to own that. You need to own that from your company perspective. Security is also a really important one. Be sure to talk to people about PCI compliance, GDPR regulations. IT teams can help you with that, but security is a way that could wipe out your company if you're not protecting your assets. And we definitely see that in small communities much more than we see in large corporate type situations. Hire a CFO, even a fractional CFO, to go over your contracts, your cash flow, your long-term debt, contracts, to consult on various software. They're going to be the experts to help you move your company forward, and hopefully so you won't spend a lot of money. And last of all, when you're ready to sell your company, one check, one exit. I have seen too many business owners get screwed over by doing these 18-month plans where they have to hit certain numbers. I've seen books get baked from companies that just don't want to pay these bonuses to like the old owner. So again, one check, one exit, and just be done with it. So kind of going back to the original question of how do you survive before you receive income or revenues? You have to think like a broke startup. Placing the right tools in place are essential, but also forecasting future costs is essential too. There is a lot of free software out there, particularly if you're building a tech startup. Things like free open source software like MySQL and SQL. One of the things I recommend you to do is to look and see kind of like what is that baseline for how many customers you have to have before they start charging exorbitant amounts of money. When you build your code on free open source software, there is a point where you become successful and those companies come and claw back all that money. So just go and figure this out, talk to these sales reps, figure out, what these costs are going to, mean 5 years down the line. Because I've worked for a number of startups that, they get crunched because they didn't realize their open source software was so expensive. HubSpot, Salesforce, Zoho, Sugar CRM, they're all great CRM solutions. Just figure out what you need. Oftentimes they have startup packages. I know HubSpot has a free CRM, but they charge for the marketing component and marketing automation. When you start going into landing pages, white papers, depending on like what your company does, this is going to be really important to you. Task management, for me, a pencil and paper is the best way to go. But I've also used something called Commit to 3 for my team, where it makes them define 3 tasks each day that they have to commit to and to finish for the company. It's been fantastic because we can have a 5-minute meeting and discuss the priorities for the day. And remember, the priority within your startup is always to make money. That is number one. It's just sales, sales, sales. There's tons of travel tools that you guys can look into. I'm not going to go over all of these. There's phone systems that are cloud systems, like Ring Central. These are things that you might want to look at as well. Merchant processing, compare the rates, compare long-term contracts. Some merchant processors are better for smaller receipt totals, and then others obviously are better for bigger. So compare. Hidden cost. You won't know what these are until they hit you, but keep an eye out for them. One of the things I came across really recently was in London, we changed out a coffee machine. And going from a coffee machine that was kind of like a Keurig for a big commercial to, an individual bean that grinds it up to brew, caused insurance change, and it also caused an inspection to happen yearly. Well, the cost of that coffee machine now is like basically $2,500 more a year that we weren't expecting and paying. So keep in mind things like that. Also, GDPR is a massive thing, particularly if you're selling like worldwide or have a tech-related business. I would make sure that whatever package that you purchase on the internet allows for GDPR compliance. If you're planning on doing a multinational company in time, your software licenses are also going to relate back to this. So sometimes this regulation is only for like basic platforms, and then other times it's only for enterprise. So make sure you know what kind of package you're purchasing. And by the way, GDPR is going to hit pretty much every online business in America, because as a European citizen, I have the right to ask you for all records to be deleted about me, or anything that I talk about. It's just a general data protection regulation. So we've talked about a ton of things so far, but how do you identify the most lucrative revenue source for your business? How do you identify a revenue source that is attractive to your target customers? What are some of the challenges in picking your revenue model? We're going to discuss this also today. The one that you probably are familiar with, particularly in the tech sector, without a doubt, is freemium. So freemium means the vast majority of your users use your product and it's free, and a very small minority pay. I'm going to tell you this: if you are thinking of coming up with a freemium program, you have to have a lot of capital in the back end. Lots of companies started out really great in the freemium model. I mean, you can find them basically all day long. All the apps on the iPhone or on the Android, they all are freemium. So if you're looking at this, just keep in mind you're going to need a lot of capital, because you're going to end up with a massive database to run of clients. And basically, only 20% of people convert. So your conversion rate is actually pretty low. Anyway, these are things that you do want to think about when you are building a tech business. All right, so when we talk about different revenue packages, there's a lot of things to keep in mind, and I'm not going to get into all these today, but I'm just giving you a brief glimpse of things to think about. So CLV stands for Customer Lifetime Value. One of the companies that kind of comes to mind which had a change of revenue model actually is Microsoft with their Microsoft Office package. If you recall, 10 years ago, you would buy a computer and it would actually most of the time already come with Microsoft email and Office and Word and PowerPoint. At some point, Microsoft decided to make this a subscription fee, where it's charging users lots of different packages from an individual to a family. They have packages based on, email only, Microsoft Word only, maybe even PowerPoint for all I know. The point is Microsoft changed their revenue model, and they changed it with the times. So one of the things that you need to do as you're growing your company is really identify the most lucrative revenue source for your business. And the only way to do that is actually to test. Test the market, hold focus groups, figure out what people are willing to pay, figure out how they're willing to pay, find out what's actually attractive to your customers. Sometimes this stuff is blended. I have a car subscription in London where I live that, includes all the insurance, but basically I pay £25 a month for a car, and then I pay an hourly rate whenever I use that car. And that works out really well because it allows me to figure out my finances. The problem with that type of package is, as a business owner, you get into very complex billing challenges. And this is why talking to your CFO is going to become beneficial. You need to figure out how the economics of these type of packages work. What are the business drivers for these different type of revenue models? And also, you've got to be able to forecast that revenue. Going back to that personal career and financial goal set, if you can't forecast your revenue, how are you going to cover those trips that you want to take, or daycare, or wherever, it's the spa? These are things that you must figure out. Testing is the key to all this. And how do you test? Put your feet on the street. Start asking people. Start, talking to random people. Talk to consultants. This isn't my favorite, but depending on your company, might be the best route. User groups, focus groups, your previous customers, test subjects, send surveys. Whatever you do, just don't hound people via email with surveys. Use a blend of these, ideas on testing to figure out how to come up with different revenue models, how to target various customers, to figure out how your economics are going to work, as well as how to forecast your revenue. So I've been going on for quite a while. I wanted to thank you for tuning in to the Southern Entrepreneur Conference. You can always reach me at my email address on the screen, and I'm happy to help discuss any ideas that you might have moving forward.